Hello, everyone. How are you? Thank you for joining the Digital Week Online. Um, Very good event with a lot of insight and thought leaders and entrepreneurs, investors. So it's an honor for me to be part of this collective. And the theme today is the fintech revolution, from convenience to distributed wealth creation. Um, so as we all know, if you look at the history and evolution of tech in finance, at least when it comes to the consumers, historically it has been mostly um, structured towards making the customer's life easier, right? So as much as you have this legacy infrastructure with the Swift system that is almost actually 50-year-old. On top of those systems, there's been different forms of innovation. Credit card on one side, in the 80s, and many others, but including also Africa, who pioneered mobile banking. So all these fintech initiatives and now digital banking in many ways, I've mostly focused on making customers' life easier, transfer simpler, payment easier, etc. Now we're getting really to an age, especially with the, the introduction of blockchain and AI. We're really getting to an age where fintech is going beyond making customers' life easier. It's more now serving a way to really enable um, distributed wealth creation. And how does it do that? Very, very simple. I mean, we all see today, the rise of decentralized finance. But in many cases, fintech can also really enable the man on the street first to access the financial world from his phone, but also to access some products, instruments, and making savings. I mean, saving money, but also making savings in a smart way, the same way as traders in a trading desk actually generate capital. And this is a revolution. And as such, when it comes to Ubuntu Group and Ubuntu Tribe in particular, we envision fintech as this way to really distribute wealth. What did we do? We kind of analyzed, and it started with my own personal experience as an African, thinking, okay, Africa is considered as developing countries. All those, it's a fast developing, as 7 out of 10 fastest growing economies in the world are from Africa. But at the same time, uh, we there's a level of poverty, and our currencies keep depreciating. So we pour every year more, but on the other hand, we have, for instance, 40% of the gold reserves, 60% of the platinum reserves. So it's a wealthy land, but stricken with some form of poverty. So how do you address that? And thanks to blockchain, the point was, okay, why don't we make our natural resources a currency or a digital asset that people can trade and that gains value over time? And as we did that, we ventured in that space and started to digitize gold, right? And gold, as you know, across all civilization, has always had value. And over the past 20 years, it gains 500%. And it gains 5,000% over the past 40 years. So point is, who trade gold today? It's just a small group of either wealthy people or investment and finance professional. But how do we bring it to the masses to also create the wealth that they deserve? So what we said is, let's technically make address financial inclusion, because yes, you do have 1.7 billion adults in the world that are unbanked or underbanked. And at the same time, most of those adults, at least 1.2 billion, have of those unbanked people have a mobile phone. So how do you solve that equation? So what we decided is, let's make digital gold available on people's mobile phone from anywhere at any time for as low as 5 cents. And this way you can really start creating that model of wealth redistribution and by leveraging on fintech. So beyond convenience, you enable people to be empowered, but also to access the global economy, right? Because when you don't have a credit card, how are you going to be paying online, right? But one thing is that everybody knows the value of gold on the planet and would be happy to receive digital gold, sometimes more than dollars or euros. So what you do is that you make it available on people's phones and you work with partners, which is what we're doing, so that you can effectively trade. And on top of it, we've put a social commerce platform so that this golden community, the Ubuntu tribe, can start engaging and making savings and have a digital wallet embedded in their profile so that they can build community, trade with one another, trade the digital gold, but also access the global economy if they want to sell, education services and they have customers outside of their borders, then they could. For telemedicine, for instance, that's also another important point where you enable and improve people's lives by erasing their incapacity to trade or transact at a global scale, and let alone remittance, right? So this is where Ubuntu Tribe is looking at addressing it. And clearly now, once you have gold as an asset and it's digitized, right, and it's stored in vault and insured and so on, suddenly you have a collateral, and a collateral that any banker or anyone will acknowledge. And now that you have a collateral, suddenly you can have access to lending, right? Or you can participate in social lending and then venture in that broad, promising space of decentralized finance. So, we're going step by step, and that's this whole revolution that we're talking about. If you take the case of Bitcoin, it has made a lot of millionaires, right? Who saw the value in an asset and so on. Now, one of the challenge, of course, of Bitcoin is the volatility, which you don't have so much with gold, right? And also the liquidity in terms of where you can change it. And those are some of the issues that we're trying to address. It's critical because we realize that today people don't have the same opportunities, right? And what we're trying to address is create a world where you have equal access to opportunities regardless to your place of birth or wealth at birth. Why? Because we believe that talent, intelligence, and creativity is evenly distributed across the planet. So money or investment should not be a hindrance for people to fully express their potential. And that's really the problem that Ubuntu Tribe as a collective is looking at addressing. And some of our colleagues and brilliant panelists will shortly engage around that topic. And an important point also that we've been working on addressing is, of course, regulation. So we're working very closely with regulators, and we do have a digital asset that is a commodity that is also looking at being a security, which then allow people to trade. So on the panel today, we have a very exciting collective of people that are, George Sebastio, who is going to be the moderator of the session. We have Thibault Verbiest, who is a partner with Yellow. He's also a thought leader into the new internet and a key force also with Ubuntu Tribe on the legal and compliance. We do have also Serge Kouakou, who is the head of fintech with EcoBank Group. EcoBank Group, with whom Ubuntu Tribe has been who has a presence in 35 African countries, which has the largest banking footprint on the African continent. We also have Aniko Szigetvari, who's the co-founder of Atlantic Ventures, focused on investing in tech companies in Africa and Latin America. Aniko was previously, the lead director with global tech investment, telecom, media, and technology for IFC World Bank. We have Shawn Anderson, who is an AI specialist, and also Benito Elisa, who is the founder of I was about to say Wakanda, but he he works, out of Mauritius on fintech and new technologies, and expand those products into Africa, into the African market, and also has a very brilliant TV show on which I was invited not around 7 months ago, covering innovation, blockchain, and African tech revolution. And last but not least is Andreas Tsindos, who is also an entrepreneur who's had the genius to crack the interoperability of payment between mobile payment operators, not only in Africa but also in Europe. So we have a very diverse group of panelists here. Jorge is a leading thought leader at global scale out of Dubai, and is extremely active in the Middle East. So Middle East, Europe, Africa, well represented here for this session. And I'll leave it to Jorge to moderate. He impressed me last time I saw him in Dubai at the Agora event. So I thought he was the best person to engage on this topic. He's one of the top specialists in fintech and DeFi around the world. I'm very honored to have them engage. So at least we'll pass the presentation phase. And Jorge, over to you. Thank you so much to Juliette Su and her team for her patience and for putting this fantastic event together. And I'm looking forward to an engaging session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mamadou. It's a pleasure to work with you as always. I am Jorge Sebastio, speaking to you from Dubai. And part of this digital week, I would like to also thank, of course, Juliette Su, but also the global blockchain organization that is helping us put this event together and to participate. I think, obviously, as we move towards the world of fintech, we're really trying to introduce a whole new series of flexible financial services that are going to include a percentage of our population that has remained unbanked. So as we're trying to do these steps, we need to introduce substantial amount of creativity. We need to introduce substantial amount of new architecture or innovation or digitalization. We are also introducing substantial amount of cost reduction. One of the primary reasons why a lot of the people remain unbanked is associated with the cost of existing financial services. The entry barrier is simply too big for the average population in many parts of the world, including some sections of the Middle East, many sections in Africa, and even other parts of the world, like even Central and South America. So we do have a esteemed audience and esteemed guests here. Bonjour, Thibault. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. So looking forward to hearing some thoughts on this innovation aspects that fintech is introducing to the unbanked part of the world. Thibault, you'll have to, perfect. Please go ahead.
Okay, am I supposed to speak first?
Yes.
What an honor.
My right.
Yeah, I'm feeling so flattered. You know, it's a very broad subject, as you know, and I have several ideas. I will try to make it simple because otherwise we can talk for hours and hours. I think that, you know, first of all, as a lawyer, I've been observing, as a fintech lawyer over the last years, I've been observing a push from the regulatory side to go through through a phenomenon called open banking, and open banking is very interesting because we have to understand and realize that it's definitely a huge revolution for the banks to be in a position now to open their bank accounts for third parties. And so it's a very big push for what we are talking about now. And Europe is definitely the leader on the planet. This is, to my knowledge, the only region in the world where we have no legislation that forces the banks to open their bank accounts of their clients, their customers, for fintech companies. This is the so-called PSD2, the Directive on Payment Services number 2. and where some fintech companies that we call initiator of payments or aggregator of accounts are now allowed under European law to get access to the bank accounts of the customers of the banks to offer added value services to the customers. And that's the first step, legally speaking, the first step that paved the way for an actual open economy in the banking area. This is one phenomenon, and this is coming from the regulatory side. Another phenomenon which is key to our discussion is, of course, DeFi. And then it's not the regulation which is the driver of this, that's the technology. And that's DeFi is coming, of course, from Bitcoin in the first place, the blockchain, but now it's booming. And where it's going much further than just opening up the sanctuary, which is the bank accounts of the banks, which is a big revolution. It's here to just bypass the banks. That's even something else. It's bypassing the banks. And as a lawyer, I am very fascinated by what's going on because I have no clue how we're gonna regulate actually DeFi. And if you have ideas, I am more than welcome. Now, what I would like to share is what I see as being the next stage of evolution, because for sure, that's not the end of that evolution, which is open banking, open economy, more access, democratized access to finance for unbanked. This is a very strong tendency. And what I see as the next evolution is exactly what I've been doing for the last month, and which I funded a foundation in Brussels called U for Internet of Universal Resources, and where we are making a proposal for a new internet, which is basically the merger of TCP/IP protocol, which is the current internet protocol, and blockchain technology, so that internet will become able to offer native services instead of just being able to transport data. So imagine an internet where the search engine is not offered by Google, but by the internet itself. Imagine an internet where digital identity is native to internet, where electronic signature is native to the internet, where confidentiality and encryption are native to the internet, etc. You come up with an internet where, notably, launching a digital bank becomes native. And you don't need to have a myriad of partners, banks. Regulation will remain to some extent necessary, but it's going to be much easier and more secure to launch sensitive services like a banking activity or fintech activity, and in a way where you wouldn't need any bank account, because you would use wallets that are themselves native to the internet. I am insisting on the notion of native because we are used to the traditional banking sector. We are used to bank accounts. We are now used to wallets because we know what a Bitcoin is. Most of us probably are using wallets. We are used to it now, but we are not used at all to the notion of a blockchain that would be native to the internet, that would go through the infrastructure of internet itself. So the services would become as decentralized as TCP/IP itself. This is my vision of the next stage of evolution of the internet. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Thibault. We go from Switzerland to a part of Africa. So we have Benito, Elisa here from Mauritius. I had a chance to visit it quite a few times. Mauritius, although on the east coast of Africa, has got quite a lot of innovation more recently in the area of tokenization as well. So CEO and founder of Wakanda. So Benito, give us a little bit of insight from the Mauritius blockchain space.
Hi, good afternoon, George. Thank you. Yes, here in Mauritius, things have quite a move on in the blockchain space. So we have an association of blockchain and crypto enthusiasts. And here with the regulators, we have a sandbox framework with which some players are working, operating within this framework. And we have some specific law regarding digital custodian license. Okay. And also they have, the regulator has recognized token as an asset class here. So that's very, very interesting. And moving forward, we are making an appeal to the regulators here to bring more specific legal framework here for players in this space to operate. And we want to attract, and we want to become a fintech hub, but we need to put more attractive incentives for these companies to come and operate within Mauritius.
Okay.
So carry on.
Yeah, continue, please.
Yes, no, in general, why we came up with Wakanda 4.0 is there was a hype, okay, with blockchain and cryptocurrency. Everyone was talking about blockchain, cryptocurrency, but there was a gap between implementing these technologies in Africa. So why Wakanda 4.0, like Mamadou has mentioned, we are here to facilitate the implementation of all these modern technologies.
Now we turn our space to Shawn Anderson. So I would like to get your perspective on how we're going to create a whole new generation of wealth with this amount of innovation. Please, Shawn, go ahead.
Hi, thanks, George. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, everything is cool.
Yeah, good. So thanks. You mentioned earlier this idea of cost reduction, and that is really what has locked me into the crypto and blockchain world for several years now. My background, I'm a data scientist. I worked in a large bank here in Canada, the Royal Bank of Canada. And so what I saw there is I saw this sort of what I call an army of data pushers. It's the RBC has 80,000 employees in Toronto, and it's all most people, their job is they're opening up spreadsheets, they're adding columns, they're transforming columns, and they're emailing it then to their next person down the chain. And coming from a background in computing science and from understanding blockchain, I started to see, wow, this huge organization that has billions of dollars flowing through it can largely be automated. And that's what we're seeing in cryptocurrency. That's what we're seeing in DeFi now with all these emerging Ethereum smart contracts. So when we're talking about wealth creation, we're really talking about efficiency. Everything comes down to efficiency and cost reduction, as you said. And I think it's just a further trajectory of decentralization. DeFi is the latest thing to come out, but I think we've been seeing this for a good a couple decades. I mean, even before Bitcoin. Like when you think about the most common operating system in use is Linux, right? Well, Linux was created out of decentralization. It was created by people all over the world collaborating, working together. Whether we're talking about TCP/IP or HTTP or Git or all these protocols that enable people to coordinate and collaborate from all over the globe, this is decentralization. So Bitcoin and DeFi are some of the latest instantiations of this, but really it's about how people are able to connect and communicate. And it creates a restructuring of our human societies, and it increases the surface area of the topology of our human networks. That's what I like to think about it. So we're seeing these sort of smaller groups of people working together more efficiently, but being able to connect more dynamically with specialized teams all over the world. And it's just this sort of perfect storm now where we have decentralization. Crypto has proven its worth and its use cases. And now we're in this situation where there's COVID lockdown and everyone's at home. So there's sort of this incentivization to be working digitally and collaborating together. And I think not just the technological implications of cryptocurrency are going to accelerate that, but the mindset, the decentralization mindset. People are going to be, especially what I'm seeing in a younger generation, people my age, they're realizing everything's changing. You don't have to go work for that same corporation that your parents or grandparents went to work for. There's more wealth creation happening. And so the distribution of that wealth as these new firms emerge and these decentralized firms emerge is just so interesting to track. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's all about efficiency, cost reduction. And I wanted to mention as well, you were talking about the unbanked. And so you might not think of Canada, where I'm from, as having a sort of situation of the unbanked, but it really does. I think we're dealing with this all over the world. There's cases here in Canada of Indigenous peoples being locked out of bank accounts and being denied access to basic things like credit. So I don't think banking, I don't think global or our banks today, our institutions, I think they've failed us in so many ways and in so many different places. And so that ball can be picked up through decentralized technology, through DeFi, no matter where you are in the globe.
Okay, thank you very much. Of course, Vancouver is one of the most beautiful parts of Canada, the best, most softest weather. We go on from there to Cyprus. So we have with us Andrea Tsindos. We share a lot of things in common, and we have done quite a few innovative projects together. But Andreas is really an innovator in the areas of stitching these technologies that don't talk to each other. So I would like Andreas to maybe focus a little bit with us of how are we stitching blockchains that don't talk to each other and create interoperability, and how we actually integrate the financial world, that is the fiat world, with the crypto world. Because at the end of the day, yes, we want the crypto world, but we are not there yet. So we need to have some intermediate steps that allow the continuous world to exist while we improve the new one.
Exactly. Thanks, George. Hi, everybody. So over the last 10 years, what I have been working on is enablers. So there's fragmentation everywhere. And until the technology or the regulation forces that fragmentation to dissolve, you're going to need enablers to issue services, whether it's financial or whether it's any other space, to actually allow consumers and the users to benefit from. So what we have is a fintech enabler, which basically allows interoperability for mobile wallets. So right now in the mobile wallet space, and the reason why it hasn't been such a good uptake is that you are forced to have a wallet of the other user. So if you have one wallet ecosystem, the other ecosystem doesn't really talk to each other. There's only a few projects that are trying to create interoperability in East Africa, for example, and it's still not truly interoperable. So, for example, it's like going to send money from one bank account to another bank account to a person, and you're asking that person to open the same bank account. It's not going to happen. Same as in the mobile technology, how it started. Before, you couldn't talk between networks on mobile phones. Then you couldn't take your mobile number with you, and then mobile number portability came. And now it's all become seamless, and we have a phone and we can talk to anybody in the world at any time. And the same is now happening in the blockchain. So you have everybody now trying to create a blockchain of their own, saying it's the best blockchain around, etc., etc. So until we get to a place where we have a protocol that is the standard, we're going to face fragmentation. So again, we've developed an enabler platform which is agnostic to those protocols, agnostic to the use cases. Now, these two platforms that we have, which one is in the real fiat world, money, and one is in the kind of new world blockchain. we can build a bridge between them. So we can create an interoperability, and we're creating an interoperability platform solution for the real world fiat wallets. And we also have the crypto world with those wallets. So we'll build that bridge where we can actually facilitate and create that adoption through this ecosystem between those two worlds. And that's the challenge right now that everybody's facing. You know, they're in the crypto world or they're in the fiat world, and the two worlds are very difficult to actually talk to each other. So you need to have some partners and an ecosystem that, you know, the regulator, because we're still going to have regulators, the regulator will actually be happy with, and the crypto world will also be happy with, to interact with that and try and cut down the costs of those two systems talking to each other, because right now it's very expensive to go from one to the other.
Okay. We move on from the virtual bank to Africa to Canada, Cyprus. Now we're going to move to Washington, D.C. with Aniko, which of course every bank or even a virtual one needs some good capital to be able to provide its services. So with a background in the VC funds, so we have Aniko give us her perspective of this new brave world of fintech.
Great, thank you. So fintech is the most popular investment area in Africa in the VC space. It has received more money than all the other tech sectors combined the last few years. Why? It's because of the underlying dynamics of the continent, which is you have a large population that's still unbanked, around 50% or so. You have a young population, 50 to 60% of sub-Saharan Africa's population is 18 years old or so, or younger. You have now an increasing urban population, which is around 500 million and is supposed to be doubling in the next 25 years, together with the population growth of the continent. And now mobile penetration is over 80% across the continent, and it's all coming together in this large perfect storm of fueling the ecosystem and opportunities for fintech companies. So in the tech space and VC space, as a result, it has been the leading force for many years now in the continent. I think there are over 400 startups tackling this space. The largest area is payments. It's almost 40% of investments to date in the continent. Just talking about the need for higher financial inclusion. Lending is the second largest one that has picked up pace quite a bit the last couple of years. You have now quite a few both locally grown, homegrown solutions, as well as international players expanding into the continent. And then you have some other areas. Remittances obviously has been around for quite a long time, but they're actually not a huge chunk of the investments received in the continent. And then you have other areas such as wealth management, investments, insurance. Blockchain is starting to, or cryptocurrencies is starting to pick up as well. Digital banking is slowly starting. So there's lots of activity. And while in the past, I'm really curious to hear our expert on this panel, but while on the banking side, but what I can see from an investment side, while at the very beginning, the banks, I think, looked at these fintechs as competition and potential threat to their own businesses. I think that has shifted to thinking as these fintechs can be partners for them to actually grow their own business and grow their top and bottom line as well. So you're starting to see a whole lot more collaboration and pluggings of these fintechs into the banking ecosystem.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. I think one thing is very important, and I think Thibault probably can help us address that. Coming from Switzerland, Switzerland is the land of trust. So how we build trust into this new system where people are still afraid of trying the technology? How do we address this to the average population? Yes, mobiles are good, but there is an element of trust that is very important for the growth in the future.
So this is the question to me, Jorge.
Yes.
And what is the element of confidence we can bring to the
trust? Yes, how we can increase the confidence, because the Swiss are the best at building confidence. If we put money in Switzerland, it is always safe. How do we make sure that the money we put
but you know, in a way you answer the question, you know, you trust the Swiss by design.
And no, but how we need to trust this new infrastructure? How are we going to go about doing that?
You know, you are asking this question to a lawyer. So as a lawyer, my temptation is to say that regulations are important. Sometimes people are calling me names because they don't like regulations. I understand you don't like regulations, and you don't like lawyers either. I understand that. Me neither. And but it's a necessary evil, you know. And but again, it depends. I think it depends who you are talking to. You know, if you are talking to a geeky population and that are absolutely fascinated by the DeFi possibilities, they certainly don't like, they don't need much apart from a trust in the technology. And they don't need much. But if you want to expand it to a large chunk of the population, you need to bring reassurance and confidence. And so, and regulations are, of course, part of it. If you want people to use exchanges and custodians, and you need to trust them, and at some point you need to be anchored into some kind of compliance and regulations, and that's absolutely inevitable. And I guess that's just, the Swiss are taking a lead in that respect. They've regulated the activity, and on top of a very solid reputation and an history of banking activities. So both are intertwined.
We have a very big participation in the panel from French-speaking countries, Swiss, Mauritius, but we have also Serge Kouakou, which keeps popping in and out from EcoBank. So bonjour, Serge, welcome. So looking forward to have your thoughts, since Africa is the new frontier. It's the wild, wild west. I do remember in Africa almost 7 years ago being able to pay by taxi using my mobile money. So Africa did change the rules, but in a simple way. So now how do we accelerate this transition to the virtual bank and to the new fintechs to go beyond mobile money?
Hey, George. Well, you said it. Currently, the banking industry in Africa is going through an interesting time of transformation. I think you mentioned your experience a couple of years ago using mobile money. I think in this part of the world, mobile money got a huge success simply because of the high number of unbanked population. If you think of it, in most of part of sub-Saharan Africa, 80% of the adult population is unbanked from a traditional banking industry perspective. In the other sense, almost 100% of this population is using mobile money today. So before, I would even say before the age of the fintechs, we started dealing with a different type of transformation brought by the telecom operators. And this is accelerating the transformation in the banking industry to the point that the corporation I work for, EcoBank, for instance, has put in place a massive plan around fintechs to allow them to to connect with our different systems, but also to support them and to be in a position where we are able to identify the most promising one, supporting them, helping them to go through some financing phases, etc., etc. So very interesting time in this place here. And I would even say that when we talk about our theme, when we think about our theme, distributed wealth creation, there is no other best place than Africa where we've seen it. Because today, financial inclusion is really a reality. Of course, we still have a way to go to make sure that the regulation and all these other things follow the realities, that the future is bright.
Okay, perfect. Actually, there's one person that addressed us earlier, which was Shawn. Shawn actually works for Longtail, which is a big data organization. These fintechs is really about the data. Data is driving the customization of the services specifically to each individual or group individuals. So how is big data playing a role in shaping these fintechs, the new oil?
Yeah, so I'm actually curious because I am so in the blockchain and cryptocurrency world, and it's interesting to hear that there's such big movements in fintech, not just moving into Africa, not just recently, but it sounds like over the past decade or so. So it'd be really interesting for me to see how the whole landscape of fintech is emerging in Africa, and not just specifically with crypto and blockchain protocols. But on the blockchain side, data is a big part of it. So we're seeing this year, we saw the success of Chainlink, for example, which is bringing data sets and validated data sets to the blockchain world. So this is key when you think about things like executing smart contracts. Another word for smart contract is a conditional payment, in which case it will go through given the results of some sort of data feed. So and these are critical. And then especially on the sort of mass movement and coordination, when we're talking about efficiencies and how societies can realign around data, this is key. So when we're talking about supply chain, when we're talking about any sort of agricultural impact and commerce impacts, these are all dependent on data. You need to know sort of where the inputs are coming from, to what extent they're available, and where they're going. So regardless of what section of industry you're looking at, the data sets are really important. And this is actually, some people might not see this, but this is what's triggering, or it's one of the key components that is enabling the movement that we've seen in DeFi over this past year. And it's the coming online of what they call oracles, which are just sort of ground truth decentralized data sets. And so when even Uniswap, I mean, one of the reasons it got so big, yes, it's a decentralized automated market maker, which opens up doors, but it has this side effect of being an oracle where it gives a decentralized ground truth of prices. And so when you have,
it's more accurate. Yes.
Yes, it's an unbiased represent, and it's decentralized. So you can look at the code. It's open source. It's not being manipulated. And in crypto, there is a history of problems behind centralized exchanges when it comes to manipulated prices and manipulated volume, etc. So the data really is a key piece of this. In fact, a lot of what people are envisioning through smart contracts and decentralization is just not possible without these sort of public verifiable data sets, which is a new phenomenon. This problem is only being solved really in the last 2 years. So it's interesting to see this, and I think it's really opening up the doors for innovation.
One thing I wanted to ask as well from my esteemed panel is, these fintechs are really about adding value to an unbanked population. So we're thinking not just turning them to being banked, but offering them a whole nature of microservices, micro insurance, micro loans, micro deposits. So it allows them to participate in this new economy, but in an incremental way. I want to maybe have a little bit of a view from Benito, because he's obviously in Mauritius and is also in the education sector. How do we combine fintech with education so that people can start using these new services in a useful way for their everyday life. If they're an agriculture guy and needs a bit of money to plant the seeds, it makes them a success at the end of the day.
Yes, yes, George, it is very true that educating our people is very important for them to adopt all these new technologies and fintech solutions. So here, let's say if we have an aging population, you know, it will be very difficult for all these old people to learn about these new technologies and all that. So what I've been recommending is that we need to have a perfect balance between fiat and digital currency. Obviously, we are aiming at 80% digital currency and 20% to remain with fiat. With the all people will continue to use cash. Okay. So yes, here what we have been doing, yeah, we organize lots of trainings in Mauritius and in Africa. We organize a blockchain conference and all that. So and also we work together with Dubai Academy from Dubai, okay, and we are trying to promote blockchain and cryptocurrency. It is a very basic online blockchain and cryptocurrency course. So we are trying. We have made some partnership with different partners from Africa, African countries, and try to push to promote blockchain so that people can know what is blockchain, how they can buy cryptocurrency, invest, you know, in all these new digital currencies.
Serge, you're here. You're from a traditional bank. How do traditional banks remain relevant in this new world of DeFi and this new world of fintech? What is the transformations that have to happen for them to play a role in this new economy as we move forward?
I think everything starts by the fact that we have to understand that we cannot survive if we don't change, if we don't adapt. I think this is the key. And obviously, we've had a massive disruption in our industry. It started long ago with the mobile money, but we have to embrace it. In the continent now, you will see a lot of partnerships between banks and telecoms to provide microloans, micro savings, and micro insurance, as you mentioned earlier. So this is one part of the transformation. And you're going to also have, we have to adopt the fintechs. You know, the reason why we have a large unbanked population like this is simply because the cost of service to them, is high from our traditional cost perspective. So we have to rely on players like them who, in some perspective, are more nimble, are more agile, and are more focused on some niches. That's why, as I said earlier, we have my organization and other type of organization which are partnering now with fintechs, supporting them, because you must be there with the new wave that is coming. Okay, and some banks go very far by taking some equities into some of those fintechs to ensure that as the wave starts, they are part of it.
Okay, that's exactly what Facebook did when they saw Instagram. We cannot beat them, we just buy them out so that we stay relevant in the changing markets. Back to Atlantic Ventures, how is this new fintech and especially DeFi, which is creating massive pools of investment, how is this also disrupting the traditional VC funds, VC capital? Or you see the role still remaining very traditional as it has in the past?
I don't see it disrupting just yet. I think it's a little bit a ways away, at least in the emerging market context or the Africa context. It I'm sure will be increasing over time, but not just yet. But I actually wanted to just touch on one thing that we talked about on the on the data side and the importance of data and how it ties to regulation. And very true in Africa that data is the basis of and is fueling the growth of a lot of the fintechs. But while data is kind of readily available in other markets, for example, for KYC, very easy because most countries in, let's say, Europe, or every country in Europe will have a national ID system. It does not necessarily exist in Africa. So the fintechs need to tap into multiple sources of data and combine it together to actually form a basis for their own companies, whether they're doing credit scoring, index insurance, just general as a business KYC verification. So it's incredibly important in the Africa context. And that then raises the issue of what happens to this data on the point of view of consumer protection and increasing interest in the GDPR type compliance. And it's all in relatively early stages of thinking in an African regulatory context. There are some countries that have now put together policy or regulation, and in the GDPR and implementation is taking place, but it's very early stages. But that's one area I would say we'll need to get and will get, I think, increased focus.
Okay. We're getting close to the end of our panel, but I would like to give at least everybody a chance of 1 to 2 minutes closing remarks, insights. What is their gut feel about where this market in innovation is going? So maybe we start here with Benito, Elisa. Where is this going in Mauritius and the east part of Africa?
Yes, I will use these 2 minutes to mention something very important, because we are talking about the 4th industrial revolution, which is being led by technology. So there will be a change in the way we will work, in the way we live. So technology will affect nearly all the sectors. So there will be a need at one point in time to have coders, programmers, and all the government, I think their existing workforce, we need to reconvert them into another coding, programming programmers here in the world. So I think there is a need for all governments to reconvert some part of the workforce, and also to train our next generation into coding and programming, because we are talking about artificial intelligence, big data, VR, AR, blockchain, fintech, and all that. So that's what I'm seeing in the future.
You want to increase their skill sets. There is actually an interesting statistic that was done in Pakistan recently, which was if you give countries like Pakistan or some countries in Africa a mobile phone with a 3G, 4G connection, smartphone, you will actually double the annual revenue of that person in 2 years. So it's a massive change. And that means that person can go to YouTube and self-educate. That person can participate in the new economy in completely different ways, or they can network with the people in their neighborhood and so on. Thibault, I would like your legal words of wisdom. Of course, sometimes legal is a little bit behind, but legal is the thing that keeps us honest somehow.
Yeah, so, but I won't lecture anyone about the regulatory concerns, because first of all, it's very boring. Yes. And secondly, this is not exactly what the people want to hear. They want to hear something positive.
Yes.
And so I think that we have very exciting times coming now with tokenization. And speaking of which, actually, we can also mention Ubuntu, because we are both of us, Jorge, we are on the board of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a good example of those new companies that want to give access to as many people as possible to wealth, to distributed wealth, in that case by tokenizing gold, But I can also mention other projects like Copyright Coins, where I'm also involved, where you tokenize IP, and all those values that are now either very illiquid, not liquid, or reserved to very wealthy people, are becoming now available for the vast majority of people through the technology of blockchain and tokenization. Only this, and of course there are many regulatory questions around this. Is it a financial product or not? It will depend on regulations, countries. In the US, it's going to be different. In Europe, it's going to be different. China is going to be different. But the trends is there, and the regulations won't stop it. And won't stop it. And we are heading for now a society where people will have access, not necessarily using the banking system, but will have access to wealth and value, even very small units, but it's gonna change the economy.
Okay, good. I do believe one thing that I found very interesting, especially about the regulatory, is that they're using sandboxes, which means bring the technology, let's try it out. If the technology works, we quickly pass regulation that matches the technology. So it's kind of a more innovative way to get the lawyers.
Yeah, but there's a lot, you're right, there's a lot to say about sandboxes, because it's hardly something that actually really help the ecosystem, because sandboxes in many situations bring more uncertainty than certainty.
Yes.
And so it's a good idea. It's a good idea, but it's hardly actually delivering what it's promised.
It's promising. Okay, Shawn, tell us a few words of wisdom from Western Canada.
Thanks, George. Yes, I just want to comment on some of the things that the other panelists have discussed, and I'll have a final closing remark. I want to say, Benito, I think you're right. I think the education piece is the most sort of undervalued or underrated piece here. I think our ability to educate and mobilize the next generation coming up, given all these tools that are now available, is where some of the biggest opportunity lies. Aniko, I want to, you're talking about GDPR, and that's something actually I haven't thought of for a while, but it's really interesting, because what do we do? I'm thinking, what do we do when a protocol itself is not GDPR compliant? Because I'm thinking about the Ethereum blockchain and it's a public database that cannot, it's immutable as well, right? So that data on there is going to persist forever. So I think service providers that are building DeFi platforms might have to be, they might not be holding any data in-house themselves, but they might be inadvertently violating GDPR just through what information gets put on the blockchain and cannot be taken down. So I've never thought of that till now. It's really interesting. And Thibault, I think what you're doing, I'm not familiar with your work until today, but it sounds like this sort of baking in cryptographic primitives into TCP/IP protocol. That I'm not sure how it's being done, but it sounds really interesting, and I'd be curious about the adoption there. If it's just able to sort of take off without anyone knowing, or if there would have to be a switch in the systems switching over to this new protocol. So
like a new internet.
There's a white paper you can read. There is a white paper on the York Foundation. It's IOUR.org, and you can read the white paper. The technical proposition is actually explained in the white paper.
Oh, I will look into that. That's great. And as a final remark, I just want to say that from my perspective, a young computer scientist and someone who lives in this world and breathes crypto and blockchain, and also just software and AI in general, we're at the beginning. We're at the infancy stages. We are pioneers, and looking back, sometimes it seems like we're late. You know, it's easy to compare ourselves to other projects and things like that, but we're absolutely at the infancy stages of all this. So it's an honor to be here at this time with pioneers. Yeah, it's an exciting time.
Okay, perfect. Andreas, your words of wisdom. So from the land of Achilles.
So I think for me, I look at it in kind of the human factor. So we're all lazy as humans, and we would just want things to work. If things work, we don't really care. So I think when I look at anything that we do, we try and get something simple. Look, when the iPhone came out, every grandma is using the iPhone now. So to do FaceTime, that was a simple thing that came out from the space. quite unexpectedly and disrupted very, very quickly. So again, mobile money, why are people using mobile money? They're using mobile money because it's something that works, and they get on with it. You know, you can go and buy, get a loan for $20 in the morning, buy food, sell it at the market, and then pay it back. It just works. So I think simplicity is the key here to try and get this. Obviously, the innovation is up. There's going to be people there that will have to drive it. The regulation will be there always, I believe. But I don't mind being regulated if it's for the benefit of for me. It's like all the security cameras everywhere that were being spied on. Everybody saying you're being spied on, but you know, if I haven't done anything wrong, I'm fine with it. If it helps the society in general by catching criminals, I'm fine to be videoed everywhere. So I think for me, this kind of fintech and innovation and crypto world, ultimately, if it doesn't benefit the society in general, it's not going to be adopted. So we just need to make sure that what we're putting out there is something that is beneficial and it will get adopted. That's my kind of take on it.
Aniko, some final words of wisdom.
Okay, I'll be quick. So, I mean, fintech is basically part of digital infrastructure, the basis of fueling the digital economy and growth of, I think, the African economies in general, and significant growth of it. That's the future. So I think we're in the relatively early stages of development of the space. There's a really long runway, lots of opportunities. Very excited about it, and look forward to hopefully supporting some of those startups.
Okay, and last words go to Serge. Kouakou, which is the traditional banking system moving to the new era. So a few words of wisdom from Africa as well. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, George. Actually, I think when you say a traditional bank, banks have understood clearly that we must think of banking as an activity and not as a premise or as premises where people have to go necessarily. And I think this shift that is happening is very interesting, because then it forces all the industry to adapt to the new players, telcos, fintechs, to also understand that the mobile device, that the smartphone or even the feature phones in Africa should be a classical distribution channel for banking activities. And as such, fintechs are more than welcome in this environment, where we understand that there is a complementarity between what they're bringing and what the traditional banks, if we could even say traditional again, are doing, because ultimately it all revolves around the financial inclusion that we are all pushing in this part of the world.
As we all know, banking comes from the word trapeza, which is the famous Greek word, which is like bench, so where you do transactions. So I want to finish maybe with a funny comment, but it's an interesting one. It's an old story that dates back to the Middle East. As you know, Middle East people, Bedouins, used to go and bring their money to the table to deposit in the bank. And when they go to the trapeza or the table, somebody is writing down their deposit. And as they take their deposit, they take it to the back bench and they write, say, okay, I took 1,000 reais from you and I'll return it plus some profit later on. But this Bedouin is sitting there giving the money back while he sees a new customer come in. And while he's sitting there, he sees the person go to the back and take the money that he just deposited in the bank or in the bench. And he says, how can I trust you with my money if I give you my money and in front of me, you're already giving my money to somebody else? What you'll do with my money while I'm not watching? So this is a famous story from the Middle East, but it teaches you how this new world of fintech is going to use this new money and introduce flexible and innovative solutions, but while at the same time having the element of trust built in. So I thank you very much, all the panelists. It's been a great time together, even if it's just a short time. Once this COVID-19 is finished, we will get together for a good coffee or a good tea. I also would like to thank Mamadou, which is somewhere in the background, and the Ubuntu project, which is introducing this innovation. And by the way, it does combine all the elements: gold tokenization, wallets, banking for the unbanked, and also as the element of training and education, as well as the element of rewards built all into one. So looking forward, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the digital week as well. Thank you very much.